Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And I am chuffed to have Adam Boxer here today. And if you're on, I keep saying all the time, but if you're watching this on video, you'll be able to see who he is. And if you're listening, the name will definitely resonate. And it may resonate in different ways. For me, my connection with Adam is actually online. We've never met in person or spoken, I don't think. But I've engaged with his stuff along with, from a distance, I suppose, that whole kind of Twitter lurker. Is that what they used to call him? A lurker? When you just sort of sit in the background and you're too scared to contribute, so you just read other people's stuff. And then more recently, and again, I was just one of the users, but he'll tell us more about this in a moment, this carousel that he's a director of, which we used in my trust, particularly in Post 16, and it was a game changer. So welcome, Adam. I guess we should start with kind of tell us a bit about what you're currently doing, how that kind of teaching and carousel split works.
Cheers, thank you, Chris. Lovely to be invited on. I'm Adam. I teach 3 days a week at a school in North London called the Totteridge Academy, and the rest of the time I split my work. So now more and more actually I'm just working for Carousel. So Carousel is now Carousel Learning and Carousel Teaching. So Carousel Learning is the retrieval practice engine. So it is, the most sophisticated, the most effective tool for helping students embed your curriculum in their long-term memories. So it's not like, sometimes people talk about it as a homework platform. It's not a homework platform. It's a memory platform. It's designed to do both homework and classwork, and you will have known that from your own practice, your trust, like you said.
Yeah.
And then more recently, we have Carousel Teaching, which is an online CPD platform.
Okay.
So essentially, it's our belief that most CPD isn't effective. Most teachers think that CPD hasn't been instrumental in improving their teaching and learning. So we're trying to get CPD working and to help teachers get better at teaching. And it's really cool. I'm working on it at the moment, and we've got our pioneer schools all lined up for our first year, launching in September. The aim is to just make people brilliant at teaching.
I love that. What a great, Is that the official tagline? If it's not, that should be definitely the tagline.
One of the things that we say is that our job is to help teachers get better at teaching.
Yeah.
And we sorted retrieval practice through Carousel, and we built something that actually does the thing that it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And our aim now is to build a thing that does what it's supposed to do, which is help teachers get better at teaching. And it draws on, so my other job is that I do school visits. So the school will call me up. They'll say, Adam, can you come on over? Normally what they do is they say, can you come and do an inset? And
Right.
I say, I'd rather not, if that's okay. Can I come on a day when there's like lessons going on?
Yeah.
We'll spend a day in and out of lessons. We'll do observations. We do observation training.
That's
We'll
cool.
give feedback to teachers. We'll give feedback to the whole school. We'll give feedback to SLT. I work with people on the day to try and help them. A lot of teachers and leaders are supposed to observe others as part of their job, and no one's been trained in how to do it.
No.
So it's something I've been lucky enough to be trained in, so I consider it my kind of duty to pass that on. So and all of that, everything that I've learned from being in 25 different schools and seeing hundreds of teachers and thousands of lessons probably by this point,
Yeah.
is kind of encapsulated in the Carousel teaching platform.
Yeah. How great! And I mean that we haven't even started the podcast, but already that is a great takeaway and a great reflective point for leaders that are listening to this, in that themselves, how much training have you had on effective observation, but probably more importantly, how much do you provide for those that are given that kind of responsibility? Because as you said, it is something that needs training, and especially if you're comparing results between different observers, you get that kind of observer bias, don't you? And if it's down to a difference in training, then ultimately you've got to take some responsibility for that. How family. So in terms of the teaching, is that secondary, primary, what subject?
Yeah, secondary. So this year I was teaching 11, 12 and 13. Next year I have a year 10 class as well, 10, 11, 12 and 13.
And what subject's that?
Chemistry for the most part.
Chemistry, cool. And is there a long background in software development, or where's that come from?
No, I have no background in software development. No, 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 no. We're very blessed. So Carousel is owned has three co-founders.
Okay,
So me, my colleague Josh, he works in edtech. He's an entrepreneur. He is a
cool.
businessman. He has built some really amazing kind of companies within that sector. And
Yeah,
Jose, who is a software developer and owns AirCurie, which is a software development firm. So
right.
we all kind of pool our particular talents
Yeah,
to build a thing that's quite amazing.
I love that. And have you always taught in London?
Yeah, yeah. So I taught. I live in northwest London, and obviously, not everyone listening to this lives in the city.
Sure.
So within a 5 mile radius of my house, there are probably, I don't know, 20 schools, something
Right.
like 20 secondary schools. So I've always been lucky enough to work within a 20-minute drive of where I
Nice.
live. So,
Oh, that's useful. Amazing. Well, let's get started. For those that are new to the podcast, we have a sort of series of kind of set elements that sit in a sequence, which aim to kind of get behind the leader that we may not know, really. So, as I said, I'm very familiar with Adam's work, but I didn't know anything about him as a person. And so I'm hoping over the next sort of 45 minutes, we will get into that. And so we
you might not
typically
like what you find.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I've also, as a disclaimer, said to Adam that we are recording this at prime bedtime. So I may not get away with either kids screaming or wife screaming at kids. Hopefully, I won't have to do any kind of bleeping out of anything. But anyway, so we start off usually with one of these fast friends questions, and the idea behind them is, I guess they they're a little bit vulnerable and people get to kind of share some stuff which maybe make a connection. So the first one that Adam chose was, for what in your life do you feel most grateful? So tell us a bit about
Yeah, so the first thing is there's no chance my wife will be listening to this, so I don't need to
that.
talk about her or my kids.
No, no.
Who presumably they should be first, I
Yeah,
guess.
you probably know.
I think like professionally, I just think I'm incredibly lucky. Um, I think the first and foremost is working at the Totteridge Academy, which
Right.
is, in my opinion, the best school in the country.
Nice.
And when I started at TTA, I was head of department, and I was trained by who's currently my line manager now, Thanos Dideropoulos, who is, I think, the best trainer of teachers and leaders in the country. And Chris, the head, and all the SLT, like, they made me the person I am today, and I'll forever be grateful for that, as well as all of my colleagues and the people I've worked with along the way. And then being able to work on Carousel, and also that it's an honor and it's a privilege to be able to
Nice.
work with so many people and to be able to go and visit lessons and to be able to just go into other people's classrooms. Like, it's not a neutral thing, for a lot of people. It's a deeply personal space. And I think, I don't know, like, I'm not really a guy for inspiration or inspirational stuff. It's just not who I am. But like, the simple fact is that, I know you know me, and maybe some of your listeners do as well, but like, I'm pretty blunt. I'm always honest. I'll never lie to another adult. I might couch the truth. I might be diplomatic, but I will never lie. And ultimately, I get to work with thousands of teachers who met me 3 seconds ago and
Yeah.
who are open to that, and who are open to professional dialogue and robust conversations. And I think that is something that makes me feel tremendously lucky.
Yeah. That is, I mean, like you say, it's so accurate to describe that as a privilege. And I mean, sadly, I wish that more leaders in schools saw it as a privilege to be kind of allowed into another person's kind of classroom. I love this idea that you talked about then, almost like that you're a product of the people that you've worked with, which is a nice sort of phrase. Do you think would you be able to locate in your head any specific attributes that you've got from specific people, or is that a bit too specific?
Yeah, so I think there is some stuff that we'll discuss further down the line,
Yeah,
but
okay.
one thing that I've already mentioned, like the idea of being robust and challenging,
Yeah,
is definitely something that is that I've learned from, especially Thanos, but others at TTA. The idea of being open and honest, always professional and
yeah,
courteous and supportive to the nth degree,
yeah,
but actually telling people what you think, and explaining to people why you think, like why you're giving that particular feedback or advice or suggestion or whatever it is. Yeah, for sure, I learned that from those around me.
yeah. That's interesting, isn't it? Because there's always, I think I can. I'm not sure I could pick out the particular time, but I remember the first time somebody was almost bluntly direct to me, and I don't think I'd had it before, and so it was a bit of a shock. But that sort of uncomfortability went away quite quickly after I realised, wow, they're saying this for the right reasons, and actually now I'm equipped with a deeper understanding that I can go and do something about to get better. Um, and then I think, like loads of people, I now seek out those sorts of people because that's kind of where the growth is, I suppose. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's get stuck into this first ignition point then. So again, for people that are new to the podcast, we talk about key events from the guests' lives, and they may be personal or professional, that acted as some sort of ignition or transformation point. And the first one that Adam's written down is a new year 10 class. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so this is not necessarily like one specific point in time, but for like the good first half of my career, I guess, whenever I started with a new year 10 class, so often, where you might have taught one class for like year 7, 8, and 9, but certainly in science, by the time they hit year 10, it's like GCSE, the classes get mushed up, everything is kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And you often meet a class of a whole load of students that you've never taught before, you've never met before. And my just abiding memory from those times was like a deep sense of frustration because they didn't know anything.
Yeah.
It was like you'd go in expecting them to know like basics of chemistry, like
Yeah.
what is an
Yeah.
atom, what is an element, what molecules, what compound, the separation techniques, that kind of stuff, like reactions of acids, and they just didn't know like anything at all.
Yeah.
Um, and I always remember just feeling extremely frustrated by that, and that
Mhm.
was almost a totemic of the struggles that I had with my students' memory.
Right.
Um, and I felt really strongly that I might have been getting better at teaching in the classroom, but my students weren't remembering more over the long term.
Yeah.
And that was very frustrating. And it's part of the reason why like Carousel exists, for
Yeah.
example, because it was born out of the frustration of you can be the absolute best teacher in terms of your explanations, your questionings, your checks for understanding, all of that stuff. Genuinely, you can be like the best in the world, and your school can have an amazing behavior policy and
Yeah.
fantastic safeguarding and careers education and extracurricular and enrichment and all of that stuff. And if you don't have a good long-term memory strategy in your school, you are wasting your time
Yeah.
because students will forget everything that you've ever taught them
God.
very, very quickly.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so, yeah, and I take it you didn't teach them 7, 8, 9, or did you?
Well, even sometimes when I did,
Yeah,
you know,
you still have
like
frustration.
yeah, the point is the year 10 thing was totemic, but it was even across the course of year 10. I'm like, you guys are just forgetting stuff. Like the
Yeah,
exam would come along and be like, well, you've forgotten everything. And every teacher is familiar with you're going through, their exams
yeah,
in the summer exams or whatever it is. And you're like, my God, I taught you this stuff. Why are you already
yeah,
answering this? And it's almost like, what do you expect?
yeah. Well,
Right?
exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
and it's a bit like the observation thing. So one of the things that I constantly have bouncing around in my head is it's just a simple question of like, what did you expect?
right.
So when it comes to observations, like most people struggle with like observing lessons, giving good feedback and stuff like that, or not necessarily struggle. They might struggle implies conscious of
Yeah.
it. A lot of people aren't conscious of it, but it's also like, what do you expect?
Mm.
Right? Like if you don't train people into doing something which is tremendously complex and difficult, then what do you expect but for them to give you bad feedback and to
Yeah.
then cook up these silly rubrics and checklists and Ofsted grades and descriptors and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So it's just a simple fact of human memory that we forget stuff. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a long-term memory strategy in place, like what do you expect?
Yeah. Oh man, to scribble that down quickly. Typically, what happens during these podcasts is the next iteration of the launch pads get born by things that people say, and that idea of what you expect is a classic title for a launch pad because it's so true. And I mean, I had a painful one as a leader. It's a long time ago now, but that idea of sending because my role is a trust role across sort of 35 schools, and so a lot of my communication is sadly kind of at distance. And that idea of, can you fill out this document, please? And then it comes back, and I'm like, no, that's not how I wanted it done. And then someone said to me, oh, did you send them an example? And I said, no. And then they didn't, but they could have said, well, what did you expect? And I was like, ah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's, okay, well, I love that. And yeah, it is bonkers, isn't it? I mean, I'm 25 years in now to teaching. It is slightly crazy that learning about memory is newish to us. That I'd spent 15.
Yeah. Well, there will be some who say that we've always done it.
Right.
I don't think that's accurate.
No.
But it's also the most boring discussion to
Of
have, right?
course.
Like in all of the different, I'm a big debater. I'm a big fan of debate and
Yeah.
argumentation and stuff like that, and criticality. This is, I'll be a bit nerdy here, but this is so. I'm Jewish. I'm Orthodox, and I was Orthodox Jewish, and I was brought up studying the Talmud,
Right.
and the kind of debate which is about like facts on the ground is called a Metziut debate.
Okay.
It's like a thing that could be found by doing like a survey or like a historical study or whatever. And it's almost like the most boring conversation in the world. It's like, 10 years ago, were people doing retrieval practice?
Yeah.
You say yes, I say no. I say, what's the evidence? They say, well, I did blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, so where did you write about that? Like, what's the... And
Yeah.
it's just banal and it doesn't help anybody. The simple fact is, like, we are where we are.
Yeah.
Students, like any other human being, will forget things and they'll forget things fast.
Yeah.
There are now tools available to help with this. Some
Yeah.
tools are better, some tools are worse, some tools are easier to implement, some tools are harder to implement. The only question we should be having now are things like, what are the things we actually want them to remember? How are we going to do it? What are the obstacles that we might face? All of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And for me, again, another painful realization for me when I've been teaching is that idea of what are you adding in that you don't want them to remember? Like
Yeah, also really important point.
I'm terrible for kind of anecdotes and all those things, and I vividly remember having to step in and teach Year 10 science in one of our schools, and it was for a whole year, and I was always one page ahead, and tried to kind of add some stories. And I remember telling the Christopher Reeve stem cell story when stem cells came up. It was the only story I had that Superman's the actor who had Superman, and I told this story about he had stem cells, and they were genuinely interested, and I thought that went well. And of course, it got to the end of the year, and they couldn't remember any of the damn science, but they could remember bloody Superman having stem cells. And I thought, oh God, what have I done? But hey, there we go. No carousel back then, sadly. Alas, damn it. And generations of people that have missed out. Brilliant. Well, let's get stuck into the first kind of launch pad. And again, for those that aren't familiar, this came about really because of a book I put together full of infographics that I used personally just to make sense of things. And then just kind of turned into a bit of a hobby where I'd have a thought, I'd try to graphically represent it. And so what we'll do is we'll ask Adam to pick two that kind of resonate with him. I'll talk through them about what I was thinking when I made it, and then we can ask him why it resonates with him. So the first one that he's chosen, let me just share the screen for those there on a laptop. The first one that he's chosen has got the title "In the Mirror and Out of the Window," and basically I was thinking about this in terms of this idea that kind of potentially the most effective leaders look inwardly when things don't go to plan, or if they need to change, and then outwardly, I suppose, when they're celebrating and for kind of inspiration. And it was just a simple way of sort of thinking about, like when things don't go right, where do people assign blame or where do they look to kind of attribute, weakness? And so the first one, I guess, is that people, sadly, or they should, I suppose, take responsibility and certainly be accountable for their actions um, and look first to their role. And I guess that scenario I just spoke about with me sending a form out, not getting back what I wanted, I could have supposed looked to them and said, "Oh, geez, why could you not do it? Why, did you not understand? Are you stupid? Blah blah blah." But of course, what I needed to do was to look at my role in that. And so, responsibility would be the first one, and then I guess the best of us. I'm going to include myself. I'm going to put you in there as well. Adam are constantly looking inside to develop ourselves and proactively are tweaking things as we go and as we go. And um, so that's an interesting way of thinking about kind of looking inwardly. But something I'm not sure that we do enough of is looking outwardly when things do go well. And so praise feels like another one of those. I don't know what the scenario would be. I'd be saying to Adam, my relationships have completely broken down with this class or with this team member. And then Adam says to me, how much do you praise and celebrate them? And I say, nothing at all. And he says, well, what do you expect? This idea of kind of, I guess great leaders, if you want to call them, constantly recognizing and celebrating the contributions of others before them. They tend to stand back a little bit potentially. There's something about, I guess, reaching a level of comfort and confidence that you don't feel like you have to do everything yourself, that you can reach out and collaborate with people and proactively seek out opportunities to extend your impact, but through others. And then the last one I was thinking about was challenge, I suppose. And it sounds like Adam loves this, this idea of debate and almost seeking out differences of opinion, because in that maybe dissonance that occurs, there's some growth in that. And I think I mentioned it earlier, I certainly now seek out people with different perspectives rather than kind of, those that, confirm my stuff. And I guess if as leaders we are able to balance that inwards and outwards, we're probably going to get some benefits in terms of the levels of credibility, the levels of trust that we feel, certainly a level of psychological safety where people feel a bit safer to, be vulnerable and to express themselves because they've been pulled in. And ultimately, I suppose you could say there's more impact. But that was kind of what I was thinking when I made it. But why did it resonate with you, Adam?
I mean, for a lot of the reasons that you said, I work in a school that prizes autonomy and accountability. So, individuals and departments at our school have like, a very high level of autonomy, but we also have a high level of accountability, and we own our mistakes,
Nice.
and that's something that's really, really important to us. And it's one of the first. So I picked it for two reasons. First, because it's one of the first lessons in leadership that I learnt when I started as head of department. And second, it's because there are two conversations I can almost guarantee I'm going to have with leaders at any school that I visit, and Mirrors and Windows is one of them.
Right.
And I think the thing for me that's really important about Mirrors and Windows is that I'm not a big I'm a fan of praise, but like where it's deserved. So again, like our school, we don't have like merit points. I think it's
Sure.
probably the only secondary school in the country that doesn't have merit points, because we believe that actually people should do like when you end up with merit points, and the naughtiest kid in the school ends up with loads of merit points because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, was I good today? And you're like,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, I don't know, can I get a merit point? Like you end up rewarding them for like meeting baseline expectations. So I believe in praise like, when it's due, and also I think that means it's more meaningful when it does come. But really, it's about when things go well, just like recognize the successes of others. I think that's really important. Show that you care about your staff. Show that you're invested in them. I'll often go to a school where we'll observe a lesson, and whoever I'm with afterwards, I'll be like, how do you think that went? And I'll be like, yeah, she's great, isn't she? I'm just like, yeah, she is. Have you ever told her that? And they're like, what? Like,
Uh,
have you ever said, I think you're great. I think
yeah.
you've got a long future at this school. what can I do to support you in your career development? And they're like, and it's just like the penny drops of like, am I supposed to say stuff like that? I'm like, yeah, definitely you are, type thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's stuff that's really important. But the mirrors thing for me is critical. So mirrors isn't about beating yourself up. Okay, it's about looking at something. Okay, it didn't work out. It didn't go as well as I wanted it to. What are the steps along the way that I could have done a bit differently to mean that I would have got a different outcome?
Yeah.
And what can I learn from it for next time? You don't need to like feel ashamed or embarrassed or like whatever. There's no point in that. We just have to keep moving forwards and say, okay, well, what can I do next time to figure that out? And it's really, really, really hard. It sounds super easy, but it's not. It's really, really not. And I think like because we naturally the human tendency is always to blame others. It's called the fundamental attribution bias, which is where anything that goes well for us, we assume is because we're amazing. Anything that goes well for others, we assume it's because of their like context or things around
Yeah.
them that have helped them there, or luck. Things that go badly for us, we assume it's because of other people's fault, and things that go badly for other people, we assume it's because they're idiots.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to actively combat, 170,000 years of cognitive development.
Yeah.
So it's not always a comfortable process, but it's a really, really important one because it makes you better at your job, and it also makes you a better human being.
Yeah. Wow, that's great, isn't it? And as I said before, for me, it feels like I'm taking back some of the power. I feel more empowered when I take a bit of responsibility, because and we talked about attribution, and I guess it's interesting, isn't it, about how there's a if we can attribute things to developable, or things that are in our control, like effort is a classic, isn't it? If something goes wrong and you didn't put a lot of effort in, that's more palatable because your level of effort is probably more in your control.
Well, it's not just that; it's an excuse because what you're saying is, I'm good enough to have done this. I just didn't put in the work or whatever.
Yeah,
And you're like, no, like the fact that you didn't put in the work is like deeply problematic.
yeah, still
It's not
your
an excuse, right? It's bad.
yeah, yeah. And again, that's really interesting about I guess as leaders, um, leaning into that stuff. And do you think that the more you look in the mirror, the easier it becomes?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
You know, I
yeah.
guess
Not universally, because also there's always going to be a point at which you can stop looking at the mirror and say,
yeah,
well, actually, I have done everything that I could have done. You just have to be careful not to get to that point,
yeah.
not to conclude that's the case too soon. I think.
Maybe it's a glance in the mirror rather than spending the whole day in front of it.
Well, it depends. I mean, I think a lot of the time, I think broadly, we could all do to spend more time in front of the mirror, but there will be points where you've done everything that you can.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's keep pushing on. So this next Fast Friends question is a long one, so I'll read it out in full. Adam chose this one. If you had a crystal ball that could tell you the truth about yourself, your life, the future, or anything else, what would you want to know?
So I have two answers to this. I think the first answer is what I would really want to know, which is that I want to know, like with real fine precision, the things that work and the things that don't. Um, we're constantly in education looking at this or that or the other and saying that's the thing that works, or that's the thing that works, or that's the thing that works. But we don't often have, we have evidence now. We are becoming an evidence-based profession, but I think there's still a lot of haziness around implementation in particular. So it's like, okay, so we know that in the lab retrieval practice works. We know that even in some ecologically valid environments, so when you do an experiment on students in a school, that we know that retrieval practice works. But like, how much do we know that what people in this country are doing when they say they're doing retrieval practice works? So on the one hand, I think I would like that, but on the other hand, I kind of want to subvert the question as well
Yeah.
and think that like knowing things like that can also, I don't know, maybe there's disadvantages to knowing stuff like that. Maybe maybe our knowledge as a species is kind of exactly where it should be in terms of our development as a species. I tend not to be one of these people who wants to change too many things.
Yeah.
Like when people are like, if there was one thing in the world that you could wish for, like what would it be? I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I don't know. I mean, the world's developed the way it's developed,
Yeah.
and like you can't expect to just change something and everything else to be completely fine.
No.
So I don't really know. It's a philosophical thing.
Yeah.
I think on balance, I would like to know, if X claims Y, does Y work? I'd
Nice.
like to know stuff like that.
Yeah, that's nice. I'm not a chemist by any means. Are there any chemist problems? Like, is there any like have we worked out everything in chemistry? Is there anything we still don't know?
Um, yeah, I think there's quite a lot we don't know. There's probably some stuff that we'll never know, like quantum mechanics, because it works in a way that's different to the way that our brains work.
Right.
So there are again some philosophers that say that we'll never really understand stuff like that. Um, I think like the big problems in chem. I mean, the stuff that people were really interested in now is the sustainability stuff. Like,
Right.
how do we do limitless energy storage?
Yes.
How do we get carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere? That kind of stuff. And like, whilst there are theories and outlines, it's these things are not easy or straightforward.
No. Would you be able to retire if you could answer one of those questions?
I think whoever whoever figures out how to do batteries, how to do what we did to like memory storage,
Right.
like hard drives and
Yeah.
stuff, where
Yeah.
you can now get 256 gigabytes on
Yeah.
a card that's smaller than your like a fingernail.
Crazy.
Yeah, and
100%.
that's happened in like 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So whoever manages to do that for like energy
I
storage
literally just saw this.
is
This is 8 gigabytes. Like,
yeah.
what is that
Yeah,
about?
but even that you've got that thumb drive, 8 gigabytes is like nothing nowadays.
Tiny. Yeah, I
Your
don't
your
remember.
your 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 phone can hold 512, like,
Crazy.
you know
Yeah, exciting.
or more.
Right, well, I got lots of chemistry questions, but we'll save that for another day. Brilliant. Well, let's get into your second kind of
Also,
ignition.
by the way, I'm not like a brilliant chemist.
Oh, really? Oh,
No,
I
no,
think
no,
you're being too modest. I'm sure.
no,
Um,
no. I'm genuinely not. It's not actually my passion.
oh, okay. You can like, fact correct me or just tell me this is some urban myth or not. But the other day I heard a scary story where a set of chemists had got an AI engine to randomly put molecules together in almost, I don't know, infinite combinations um, to try and create. And I think the sort of task it gave it was keep putting things together, making more and more sort of useful, or I don't know what it would be, beneficial molecules maybe.
Sure.
And they left it for like 2 weeks, and apparently the urban myth is that it found some new compounds that we never knew existed. Does that sound based in reality?
Beyond my pay grade.
Yeah, it's quite scary for me to think, as a non-scientist, non-chemist, this idea that there are molecules that we haven't put together in certain, and even like it feels like it's sort of, Lego. I think the end of the story, which was the dangerous one, was they changed one thing in the code to say, instead of making increasingly useful molecules, make more and more dangerous ones.
Yeah, yeah.
And that
And then
was
we all
really
died.
quite exactly. And they were like, yeah, let's try and erase that data.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right, let's get into your second ignition point then. So this one you've called observation. What was that about?
Yes. So this will be this returns to our theme, and it'll be the first time that I was really professionally challenged, which was when
Okay.
I was first observed by my boss Thanos. Um, and look, I'd been teaching for a while by then. I'd only just joined the school, and I joined this head of department with already like an established reputation as someone who knew about science teaching. And every observation and feedback I'd had up until that point, I don't think had made me a better teacher, right?
Okay.
So, and I was used to just like either rolling my eyes at the feedback I was receiving or just arguing straight out the bat. And I just thought that's what happened after
Yeah.
observations.
Mhm.
And I had this observation with Thanos, and we have these 4 questioning strategies that we use at the school. And I did the lesson, whatever. And it wasn't like he was just dropping in and said to me after feedback, etc., etc. He said, I really enjoyed the way you were using the 4 questioning strategies. I can tell you've been working hard on it. I said, thank you. I really, really have. And I really had. And the questioning strategies are designed for like individual student response, right? So for example, one is where we are really careful with the student that we select to answer the question, based on, for example, how good an indication they give us of the rest of the class's understanding. So that kind of thing. And he says, yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. And he said, oh, just out of interest, when you're asking those students those questions, you're asking one student at a time. And I said, yes, that's right. And he said, do you not think it would have been better to use mini whiteboards, because then you'd get everyone's answers? And I was like, yeah, it would have been. Now, a normal observer would have stopped there,
Sure.
right? It would have just said, great, cool,
Off
and
you
moved
go.
on. So Thanos is not a normal observer, and Thanos just literally just gives me, oh, okay, so why didn't you?
Right.
And at that point, I was like, that's a different category of question,
It is.
because I knew then that anything I said to him would be an excuse.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what could I possibly say as an answer to that question beyond just laziness,
Yeah, exactly.
or beyond just not?
The pens never work, is what I hear most of the time.
Yeah, but it's nonsense, right? Because it'd just be like, I don't understand, just get more pens.
Get more pens, geez, yeah.
Or I could have said, my students would doodle on the boards, and he'd say,
Exactly.
okay, so just give them a detention for doodling on the boards.
Exactly that,
Or
yeah.
I'd say, students won't write anything, and he'd say, okay, so tell them to write something, or they'll have a detention. But like what are you?
Yeah.
There's nothing. I knew in that moment I was snookered, right? That there was
Yeah.
nothing I could say, and because the guy's just like so effortlessly, completely cut through the bullshit.
Yeah. And I'm assuming he was delivering this quite calmly and just.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And also the key thing that he'd done, and this is something that I always try and do when I'm giving feedback, is that he'd started from a position of agreement. What he could have done is said, when you do the questioning, you did it one by one. If you use mini whiteboards, it would have been better because blah, blah, blah. Because essentially what he had made me do is, by my own terms, say that I agreed, right? And I had said it would have been better if I used the mini whiteboards, and therefore, because I did not use the mini whiteboards, my lesson was worse.
Yeah.
Right? And that's essentially, that's not him saying it, it's me
Yeah.
saying it. So it's really important to me that, like, one of the, when I'm giving people feedback about, say, whether or not students are paying attention, right? So what I'll do is I'll make sure I'll speak to a couple of students during the lesson. Like, let's say the teacher is doing some questioning, I'll go to a student really, really quietly, and I'll just say, oh, could you just tell me what question Mr. Baker just asked? And they'll be like, what? Like, what question? Did you hear the question? They'll be like, oh, I just didn't hear it. Okay, great, no problem. And I'll go to somebody else and I'll say, your friend just gave an answer. What did they say? And I say, oh, I just don't know. And the reason why that's important is because there's no teacher in the country who thinks it's okay for their students to just not be listening.
Yeah.
Like giving feedback about curriculum sequencing,
Yeah.
or whether their feedback was the exact right point in the formative assessment spectrum.
Yeah.
All of that kind of stuff. Like when there's a debate to be had, sometimes, again, not always, but sometimes people like latch on to the wrong thing and you end up in an argument. Whereas no one can disagree, right? Like it's really important to hold people to the thing that they fundamentally agree with, or the thing that they say they do. And like that's kind of so what I learned from that is the idea of just challenging someone directly,
Yeah.
and trying to help them understand that this is not something that they're ever going to disagree on, but also we're trying to be fact-based, we're trying to be cool and calm and deal with things that aren't particularly controversial. And our strong belief at TTA is that if we don't challenge you, we don't change you. So if we don't, if there's no challenge in the feedback, nobody gets changed. And you spoke about this a bit earlier, that like criticality and debate are like really important. And, there is a place for patting each other on the back and, clapping hands and just mindlessly liking and sharing stuff. But there's also a really important place for criticality and debate. And I've been thinking about this a lot recently with the demise of like edgy Twitter. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. And it's really my strong belief that there's no idea in education that won't benefit from criticality, right?
Hmm?
And even criticality from people who are wrong,
Yeah.
right? Even if the idea is right, okay, and I'm using the word right and wrong advisedly,
Of
like
course, yeah.
just so people understand what I'm getting at. Let's say you've got an idea and the idea is right, and you've got somebody else who is wrong, and they offer criticality on that idea, you can still only stand to gain,
Yeah.
right? And without that level of challenge, ideas, people don't improve. You
Yeah.
just, yeah,
That's
you
really
just
interesting.
keep going the way you're going.
Because I guess the challenge triggers deeper reflection. Yeah. I was
Yeah,
just,
it's not. Look, it's just to be clear, right? Like, there's a methodology here. It's not. You can't. I'm not telling people to just go out there straight away and just be rude to everyone, right? Like,
yeah.
I'm very specifically not saying that. It takes me. I have a very complicated personal methodology that I use for exposing people to challenge.
Yeah.
But like CPD is a great example, right? A lot of CPD doesn't work because you stand up and you present an idea. Let's say mini whiteboards, and you say mini whiteboards are great because they help you assess everyone in the room. So the people who are watching think, yeah, that is true, but I assess everyone in the room anyway,
Yeah.
right? This is not about me. Like, I don't, it's an interesting thing, but it's not, and I don't necessarily disagree, but it's not something that I necessarily need to change in my practice. One of the most common ones is stuff like calling out in lessons. Right? I talk about calling out in lessons the whole time, and everyone is like, yeah, well, kids don't call out in my lesson. I'm like, but they do. Right, like that's why I don't do the inset. That's why I want to do the observations, because I need to be able to say to people, like, I was in that lesson for 10 minutes and there were 8 instances of children calling out, and on each one you didn't challenge a student. So, like, and again, like, that's not the way that I would say to someone, right?
Sure.
But that level of challenge is important, because otherwise people just assume it's not about them. And I'll always ask people in the morning before I go and observe lessons, like, what do you think, like, what kind of things do you think we'll see?
Yeah.
Because I need to be able to address them on the things that they're interested in, the things that they're talking about, and vouch for whether or not that is actually happening in classrooms.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I had one recently. I I was always kind of, when I thought about self-talk, our kind of inner dialogue, I was always quite comfortable with that sort of, oh, the distinction is positive, negative, fine. Don't have to think about self-talk anymore. I've got enough that I need. And then I tripped over this idea that there was another distinction, this declarative and then interrogative. I was thinking, so I read a bit more about it, and the idea that one way of self-talk, either positive or negative, is through statements or declarations. I'm rubbish, I'm great. And then they were suggesting that if we interchange that or mix it up with interrogative, where we ask ourselves questions, so not I can do that, but can I do that? It requires additional thinking and almost the search or the kind of seeking out of evidence to either explain or not explain. And we typically then believe that type of self talk more because there's more behind it. But that's interesting. I guess it's similar in it that you are challenging yourself. Interesting. Right then, let's get on to the next launch pad. I think we're going to be on this one for a while because this is a juicy one. And so this next one that Adam's chosen, it's not got a very sexy title, to be honest. It just says de-implementation. And of course, I still work with people who are, emerging into leaders who, for them, didn't they're quite openly admit they didn't know that this was a thing. They didn't know that there was a word called de-implementation. They've only ever heard of the opposite. And so, of course, there's this idea, isn't there, that a lot of times the kind of what I've written here, the inertia of kind of the status quo is so powerful that we can just keep going. It's like, well, it's more effort to change it than it is to just keep it going. And so we need to proactively kind of assess the efficacy of all of our initiatives and then just be brave, I guess, to select what the next stage is in their journey. And so a lot of the stuff I was reading about when I was looking at this one was by kind of Norton and Chambers and then Wang. And they talk about a series of, I guess, options that we've got with something that's not as effective as it used to be. The first one being kind of reduce. So our first option might be to kind of decrease the frequency, the breadth, or the scale of the thing that we're using. The next one would be to remove it. So we could just stop the initiative cold and not replace it with anything else. The next one is to replace it. So it may be that the need is still there, but the current initiative is not fit for purpose. And so we would implement a different but similar initiative. This is where they make the distinction between replace and then this idea of rethink, which I think is an interesting one, where you are replacing it, but it's with something that's noticeably different. So you're almost rethinking your approach to it completely. And then I started kicking around this idea of, what is it that would cause sort of you to choose certain ones of those, and then just came up with this idea that, of course, if the impact of the initiative is not there, then that would trigger some change. If there's a drop in resources or a drop in confidence, or suddenly it doesn't align with values or other things, and then maybe there's just new stuff out there, that there's innovation happening, either just in thinking or new processes and products that force you to rethink. But what's your connection with de-implementation, Adam?
So you remember I said that the mirrors and windows is
Yeah.
one out of two. There are two conversations I can more or less guarantee I'm going to
Right.
have. So mirrors and windows is often the first, and it's because so often leaders will get frustrated when they'll say to me in the morning, I say, what kind of thing will we see? Let's say they say cold call. Okay, so I don't use the phrase cold call as a strategy, but I say, okay, well, let's see if we see cold call. We'll go into like 4 or 5 lessons. We won't see any cold call at all.
Right.
And they'll get annoyed. They'll be like, it's just really frustrating. Like, we've done the training, we've done this, we've done that, we've done the other. And I said, look, let's slow down. Yeah. Let's not get frustrated. Let's just walk through the exact steps you've been through, and let's figure out why it is that, despite the fact that you think you've said cold call, they've not heard it. And often along the way, we can find a problem. So, for example, like cold call is a great example because it's got bad definition, right? It's too broad a term to be useful, and people mean different things when they talk about it. And I say also things like, in your teaching and learning policy, it's got 9 or 10 different teaching strategies, and you've said things like, at this school, at Schoolington Academy, teachers check for understanding by, and then give a list of like 10 things. And right, when you give a list of options, people consider the list to be optional.
Yeah.
Right. And what that means is that they look at it and go, oh, that's interesting, but they don't actually do anything. But one of the big problems as well is that, someone will say to me, I'm just really frustrated that I'm not seeing cold call. And I said, and you also said that we'd see many whiteboards. We haven't seen those. I say, yeah, we haven't seen that. I said, can I be really honest with you? And I said, yeah. I said, I knew we wouldn't see those things.
Really?
Like, what do you mean? I said, I knew we wouldn't be able to see them. I should have written it down in an envelope and sealed it in my vision early this morning. Because the second I walked through the doors and you gave me your teaching and learning policy and it was 50 pages long, I'm like, it's a book. You've given me a book.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people aren't going to read a book. Like, what are you mad? Like, what do you expect?
Yeah.
Right? 1st of September, the guy turns up, they're like looking for the photocopying, the coffee, their seating plan, all of that stuff, and you give them a book.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is the thing. And then you stand up and you give half an hour teaching learning thing on the inset in between the safeguarding training, the health and safety training, the stuff they need to do about metacognition and oracy, and then all the other stuff about the careers posters that they need to put up and where their duty spot is and all of that stuff. And like you're surprised? Like, what did you expect? Like, you think this person's going to be cold calling tomorrow? It's not going to happen. And that's a problem with policy, right? People often write their teaching and learning policies as like the world that they wish it to be.
Sure.
And like, but this isn't reality, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just nonsense. It's just a dream. So one of the things I often find myself saying to senior leaders is similar to the implementation. I use a simpler term. So did you ever watch The Bear? You watch The Bear?
Yeah. The chef. Yeah.
So The Bear is this amazing TV show which anyone who's interested in like high octane leadership should watch The Bear. Um, and there's this amazing scene in it where Kami, who's this young, brilliant chef who takes over this failing restaurant in backwater Chicago, there's a flashback to when he was training in one of the best restaurants in the world. And in the current restaurant in Chicago, everything's like messy and dirty and everyone's shouting and swearing. And the flashback is this restaurant where everything is perfect and immaculate and clean and clear, and everyone has got their job and everyone's doing their role and everyone is professional. And Kami is the sous chef, so he's not the head chef, but he's like in charge of, like, I guess, the other chefs, and he's kind of designing this new dish, and he's putting it together, and you're watching him put it together, and the thing is beautiful, right? And it's got a scallop over here, and it's got a micro basil over there, and it's got an emulsion over there, and it just looks incredible. And his head chef, who we later find out is actually a toxic and awful leader and person, walks past Kami, looks at it, and goes, "That's shit," and just walks off.
Really?
And Kami is like, "What?" Like, and then this guy comes back and he takes a piece of green tape, and the green tape is what they use for labeling everything. So like stock,
Sure.
bones, waste, whatever. And he takes a piece of this green tape and he writes the word subtract on it. And he puts it on Kami's desk, his workstation. He just points at it and he goes, "That's how we improve." And Kami realizes that he'd done too much to this dish.
Right.
One too many flavors, one too many textures, too much on the profile, whatever it was, there was something that he'd added that just went too far. And actually, the way we improve is by subtracting. And schools are very good at adding and very bad at subtracting. They're very bad at saying, "Let's not do this thing anymore." And I think you're right that, like, all of the things you spoke about, you know, the replacing, reducing, all of that stuff, like, I think those are like good ways to go about thinking about it. But the headline metric is to just subtract.
Yeah.
It's just to say, okay, well, what should we just not do?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what can we just take away? Because we can't do everything. School is too complex an organization. And if you try and do too many things, you just end up with, like we said, if you give people a list of options, they think the list is optional. If you give people a book, they won't read any of it.
No.
Right? Give people a one-pager, they might read it. Give people a book, they're not going to read any of it. So,
yeah,
what do you expect?
I love that idea. Yeah, and again, you know, I think the listeners to these podcasts, are, you know, expect and look forward to challenges and questions that they can reflect on. And I guess the one from that section would be, you know, what is it that you could subtract from whatever area of the school you're leading
Yeah,
on?
we had a debate about this literally today. In our department meeting, we have at our school, we have a central teaching and learning policy, which is like a page, and then departments build their own handbook, which is supposed to be, again, like 2 or 3 pages.
Right.
And our policy is supposed to describe the world as it is rather than the world as we wish it to be. And one of the things we were debating today was a particular approach to solving equation questions, like in physics. And like we had a debate today, not about whether. So basically, there's an approach that someone suggested we use to solve the equations and become consistent across the department in using the same approach. Nobody in the room disagreed that that was the right thing to do.
Okay.
What we disagreed on is whether we should do that in September.
Right.
Right? As a department, there's only so much we can focus on. There are only so many things we can take on. And we agree that this is something that's good and important, but we're not going to put it in the policy unless it's something that we do or something that we take very, very seriously. And we only have limited capacity for things that we do and take very seriously. So is this the thing that we're going to put in there? Or are we going to put it in there and then it'll never happen? And we just undermine ourselves and our own professionalism by saying there's something that we do that we don't do.
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of things wrapped up in there, which is great. That idea of being being really strict with yourself about what negative consequences will occur by just adding and adding and adding.
Yeah, it's not neutral. And the phrase that I use now in carousel teaching is not subtract. The phrase that I use now is and this is a bit of a lame phrase because I'm not really normally into like the leadership-y type stuff. But I do like this one. It's restrain and sustain.
Okay.
So the idea is restrain yourself, hold back.
Yeah.
Right. Like you don't have to do everything. Okay, you saw a cool blog online about some new teaching and learning initiative. You saw something interesting. You read an interesting article in the TES about something to do or outreach or whatever. Okay, restrain. but you
Yeah.
don't have to do everything. You can't. Nobody is ethically obligated to fix problems that they cannot fix.
No.
Right. So restrain yourself and hold back and focus on just a couple of things and sustain. Maintain your focus. Maintain your gaze. Keep thinking about those things. And I just cannot imagine that there's another way to do leadership. I say this quite a lot. At TTA, I've been there like 6 years now. In all of that time, we've had 4 whole school teaching and learning priorities. And the schools that I've been in before then, we'd have 4 a term.
Oh, easy.
Right?
Yeah.
So the idea is that you restrain yourself and you say, what is the one thing that is absolutely categorically going to make this school better?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the thing. Screw everything else. Let's do that thing, and we'll sustain it until we've done it. And that makes a huge, huge difference.
I feel like I'm going to have you as co-author of this next Launchpad book. I've written down so
That's
many.
fine. You write it and just send me some royalties.
I'll send you some royalties. Yeah. Wow, that's great. And again, another just great challenge to people that are listening. Okay, well, let's finish off with the last question, which again, I'll be interested to know what this is. But the question you chose was, what personal quality do you feel you need to develop the most?
Yeah, so I present a brave face here, but I'm a deeply flawed individual. We all are. So like I don't think I'm special in that regard. But I can be petty and jealous and miserable at the success of others, just like anybody else. I think for me, the thing that I've always had to work on is like I have a very strong ego and kind of sense of my own self and abilities. And whilst I'm aware of the fact that I am also a capable human being and there are things that I can do and there are things I can do that I can do better than other people, I also need to humble myself quite substantially. And that's something that I've had to learn through the challenge and change process and through looking in the mirrors. And I guess that's part of the reason why I chose those for tonight, because they're not things that come naturally to me. They're things I have to work on and have to keep working on, and I don't find easy. And it's like a constant like battle with myself to understand my own inadequacy. And that's not with like any sense of like blame, like beating myself up. Like I'm not getting like the whips out and flagellating myself like a 11th century monk. But it's just about understanding who you really are and what you really are capable of, and also being able to see others and their capacities and capabilities as well.
Well, I think that's a really honest reflection, and something I suppose that I don't think you're alone on, and other listeners, and certainly it resonates with me. And I only just recently reached out to have some counselling about why I felt so sort of unsettled all the time, and I would catch myself like being like competitive with colleagues over the simplest things, and I didn't know where it came from. Like I felt like I had to, Brene Brown would call it hustling for your self worth. That I'd in meetings feel like waiting for opportunities to, and so I've done a bit of ego exploration myself, and it's quite uncomfortable. But I guess what we've talked about this whole time is through at the other end of that uncomfortableness is something better, and it definitely was for me. I mean, understanding myself better is probably a good thing, although I'm 47 now, so I've left it a bit late.
Well, as Nietzsche says, when you stare into the void might stare back. None of this is necessarily enjoyable, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And I guess like the anecdote that will wrap this all up is, and again, this is not unique. This happens quite a lot. But one totemic example is I went to school a while ago, and we did all the observations and blah blah. And I wasn't with the head teacher that day. And then I did the feedback to whoever did the feedback, and then the head teacher wanted to have a chat. We sat down, and they said to me, so what's going on? And I said, look, it's not my job to like catch my words. It's always my job to be honest. And there's lots of lovely things I saw going on, blah blah. But like in basically every single lesson I went into today, a student called out at least once in every single lesson. And she looked at me like in shock. She was like, what? I was like, yeah. She was like, and you didn't see any like C1 or C2 or C3, you know, the behavior system given for that. And I said, lady, I didn't even know you had that policy here.
Right.
Like I've been in lessons all day and I've not even heard those words, like for anything. And she's getting so annoyed. She's like, I can't believe it. Like we streamlined everything. We built a new policy and we put the posters up and we did the training and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, look, you know, we're not going to get anywhere, right? I said straight up, I said, look, do you think your staff are... Sorry, I said, oh, hang on. 1 second.
You've lost
right
it.
in the middle of the story. No, can you still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so my headphones are going to die in a minute, but we'll be okay for the time being. So I said, look, you know, you want your staff to deliver C1, C2, C3, whatever. She goes, yes. I said, do you think your staff are idiots? And she was like, well, no. I was like, so do you think they understand the concept of C1, C2, C3? She goes, yes. I said, okay. Do you think your staff are lazy? And she was like, also no. I said, okay. I said, do you think your staff are like belligerent and deliberately trying to undermine the things you're doing in this school? And she said, no, of course they're not. I said, okay, well, if that's not the problem, then where do you think the problem is? Right? Like it has to be somewhere.
Yeah.
There has to be a problem somewhere. And sure, in some schools, some people aren't that great at their job. And in some schools, people are lazy. And in some schools, some teachers are belligerent and want to undermine and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If that's not the case, and for, you know, in 95% of schools, it's not going to be the case for 95% of staff. If they're not doing the thing you want them to do, it's for some other reason. And we need to figure out what that reason is. And that's looking in the mirror. And it's about understanding that everyone around you is just like you. Everyone around you is also smart and professional, committed and dedicated to improving the outcomes of the students in their charge. If they're not doing the things that you want them to do, it's not because they're idiots. It's not because they're not committed. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're trying to undermine you. And you have to figure out what it is that you can do differently to try and obtain that different outcome.
Perfect ending. Tell us about how people can connect with you and then with Carousel.
Well, if despite everything you've heard, you still want to do that, you can catch me. I try and be as many places as I can at the moment. So you can get me on Twitter. That's Adam Boxer 1. You can get me on Blue Sky. That's Adam Boxer Education. You can get me on LinkedIn. That's Adam Boxer. You can, if you are interested in Carousel Learning, the retrieval practice engine, and how we can help with your school's long-term memory policy, email me at adam@carousel-learning.com. If you are interested in the CPD that we have to offer at Carousel, you can email the same email address, or you can email cpd@carousel-learning.com. And if you're interested in the school visit, again, you can get in touch with me through any of the above, or you can email me at adamboxereducation@gmail.com. You can also, and I don't know if I'm going to get told off for this, but I have my own podcast. It's called
Cool.
You might like it. We come every Friday. It's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in that, you can check us out on all good podcasts.
Amazing. Well, I'll put all of those links in the kind of the comments and whatever it is kind of thing. Thank you ever so much again, Adam, for sparing the time. Thank you to listeners, obviously, for listening. And if you want to, get more involved in the Launchpads or with me, then same as Adam, really, on all the socials and through the website. Have a great rest of your day. See you soon.
Cheers, bye.